Hi, welcome to our roundtable discussion. This is the first of our three roundtables this semester focusing on English majors in different professional fields. I am Dr. Erin Elizabeth Smith. I'm the Director of Career Development here in the English department at UTK. And we are very excited to be hosting our two UTK English alumni, Jasmine Johnson and J. Rose, for a roundtable discussion on how their English degrees help them in their future careers in law. So we're gonna start out. I'm gonna be reading some bios here. So just I'm
You can
gonna
put us
try
on.
to be
You can put
looking
us
at
on
the
hold.
screen.
Yeah. You can put us on hold until she's done.
So let me introduce our wonderful alumni who are joining us today. Jasmine Johnson was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. She earned a BA in English, summa cum laude, from the University of Tennessee, where she was inducted into the Phi Beta Kappa Honor Society and received the Chancellor's Citation for Extraordinary Professional Promise. Jasmine later earned a JD from Vanderbilt University Law School, where she was a Chancellor's Law Scholar and Dean's Leadership Award recipient. Jasmine now resides in Atlanta, Georgia, where she practices as a corporate attorney. She advises clients on a variety of complex transactional matters, including cross border mergers and acquisitions, commercial contracts, and corporate governance. In her free time, Jasmine enjoys traveling, concerts, dance classes, and NBA games. And our other alum is J. Scott Rose, who moved to Texas immediately upon graduation and has since practiced as a partner in two of the nation's largest firms. He advises clients in commercial financial transactions with an emphasis on distressed credits and business restructurings. His work has earned him recognition in the best lawyers in America in two separate practice areas, litigation and bankruptcy. Scott also serves on a management committee of his current and former firms for a total of 11 years. In addition to the practice of law, Scott has participated as an investor in the broadcast media, hospitality, and sports industries, an experience which he believes greatly improved his client service as an attorney. He's the author of three published novels, so exciting there. I see the English degree in use in that and in one capacity already, including two works of historical fiction based on the U.S. Constitution. He also writes extensively about baseball as a commissioner of the Best American Baseball Experts Society. So excited to have you here. Um, I'm so excited to have you as part of this conversation. I'd love to start out by asking both of you to share a little bit about your time as an English major at UTK and how your coursework here prepared you for your career in law.
I can kick us off,
First,
Scott.
you first.
All right. So I really enjoyed my time at UT, and I would say, there's an obvious direct correlation between the skills you acquire as an English major and the skills you use as an attorney. So, of course, as an English major, you do a lot of reading, you do a lot of writing, you learn very good analytical skills, you learn how to formulate and back up your arguments, and the very same skills that you put into practice at your time at UT will translate to your practice as an attorney. So I do corporate work, not a litigator by any means, but my day to day typically looks like reading tons of contracts or drafting tons of contracts, really analyzing different contracts and figuring out how to make an agreement most favorable to my client. And in order to do that, I have to have my own arguments to justify why I changed the document in the way that I did. So I think there's a direct correlation between English and practicing law.
So, Jasmine, when you were doing your undergraduate work as an English major, did you already know you were going to go to law school?
I did. So when I was a senior in high school, I was pretty interested in becoming a lawyer. And when I first went to UT, I was still interested, but a bit intimidated by the process. And I questioned whether or not I would actually go for it. But I think around junior year, I had to decide to actually go for it because the LSAT, I think, has to be taken your junior year. Maybe you can take it your senior year, I'm not sure. But basically, by the time it came time for me to decide, I pretty much had in my mind that I was going to go for it, and I did.
Okay. Well, it's hard to recall exactly now that it's over 4 decades ago, but my official position is that while I was an English major, law school wasn't in the picture. I was an English major because I wanted to be an English major. It was the only true course of study on the university campus in my perspective. And I may have brought that with me when I came to Knoxville, but the professors and instructors that I had in my first few English courses reinforced that's all. I only wanted to do English all the time. And so it was a really important experience for me early in my life, and subsequently set up a lot of the things that Jasmine described, but I don't think I had those in mind when I was listening to the old guard, teach poetry and short stories and the American novel.
Yeah. And Scott, I will say, even though I was pretty interested in becoming a lawyer, and that's part of the reason why I majored in English, I had backup plans in the back of my head. So, like publishing, teaching, different things that you can do with an English degree were in my mind. And that's one reason why I chose to major in it, because you can, kind of choose your own path and go down it.
I agree entirely with the flexibility of the English degree. I'm curious. So kind of answering some of the questions that I was thinking about in terms of like when did you first start thinking about law through the English degree? I'm curious. Kind of talking a little bit about how you handled the transition from being an English major to a law student. Like, what was the process both of thinking about the application process, but also thinking about the different kind of coursework the ways there may be places where there may be overlap and places where there may be difference.
Well, I'll go first on that one because I gave it not a single moment of thought. So, back to you, Jess.
Well, Scott, I don't know if this is your experience, but I remember when I was a 1L, a first year law student at Vanderbilt, I went to my first legal writing class, and the teacher said, "Raise your hand if you think you're a good writer." And I thought, okay, I think I'm pretty comfortable raising my hand on that one. So, I did it. And she said, "You guys will probably struggle the most in this class." And for me, that ended up being true because legal writing is so different from any other type of writing. You have to be like very terse and concise and to the point. And I think that's probably taught with some concentrations at UT. I didn't do it as much when I was there. And so it was kind of foreign territory in that respect for me. Scott, did you have an experience like that?
Fortunately, I didn't. Maybe I still write poorly as a lawyer because I think I still write in the same fashion as I did back then, but I've gotten away with it. But if anything, the immediate response or realization that I had was that I was prepared to read large amounts of material in a short period of time and discern important points from that. Obviously deriving the legal principles and policies is different from trying to understand what Faulkner's saying in Absalom. But the process of doing that is similar. So I realized pretty quickly, though it wasn't intentional, that the English background was serving me very well. And I also say, other than my English classes, that first semester of law school was probably the most enjoyable I had in my 7 years of college, because it was, it was using all that I had gained in how to learn as an undergrad in a very intense environment.
Well, and that leads me into the question, kind of thinking about the types of writing, and I love the anecdote you were sharing there, Jasmine. What talk to me a little bit about like what types of writing, what does legal writing look like? In what ways does it differ from the writing that you might do in, say, a Faulkner class, or in what ways do we see the skill sets that you learn in English transfer to law school?
I think it depends on what you're writing. So, well, I would say, regardless of what you're writing, there's a way to be creative, even as a lawyer. Creativity takes on a different meaning in the legal context. So, if you are, drafting a motion, then you can get creative with your presentation of the facts. But if you're drafting, let's say, a distributor agreement between two parties, the version of creativity that you would present would be finding just an artful way to present a provision that's favorable to your client. So most people wouldn't consider that creative, but I think within the legal community, we would, because you have to find a way to make certain provisions fit within a document.
I agree with those observations 100%. I appreciate her distinction between the two. I hope that we still have a profession where a degree of individuality and creativity is available or permissible. But tastes change just as they do in literature. The approaches to legal writing have changed. I don't know if anybody on this call knows the name Brian Garner, but Dr. Anderson certainly does. We've discussed with it. He's made a complete career for himself out of teaching lawyers how to write. If you Google Brian Garner, you'll see he's got a whole empire on that. I personally don't like the way he teaches people how to write. And I don't write like that. But, as I said, I think we do ourselves a disservice if we decide to pigeonhole ourselves into what somebody else says you have to do. And I didn't get that experience as I grew up as a lawyer, and I hope you're not having that experience, Jasmine. We need to make sure that there's some room for creativity. And of course, turning that back to English, if that were the case, we wouldn't have Faulkner, we wouldn't have James Joyce, we wouldn't have any of the Cummings, Hopkins, these people were mold breakers, right? And so I hope that the law and my personal experience after 40 years now is that it still gives you some latitude to be yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, on a day-to-day basis, what sort of I guess let me rework that question. What are some of the roles that people find themselves doing in the field that involve writing and or reading or any of these kind of skill sets that we learn in English? And do all of them require law school?
Scott, I'll let you take that one first.
Yeah, I'm going to ask if you can rephrase the question to use a witness dodge.
Certainly. I'm thinking about so a lot of our students are interested in going into law, but that doesn't always necessarily mean becoming a lawyer, correct?
Okay. Okay.
Are there other roles within the field that maybe utilize some of the school skills such as, writing, reading, analysis, etc. And do all of them require law school?
Well, I used to tell everyone that asked me that an investment in a law degree was never a poor one. That you would be able to take the experience and the skills that you learn, be they actual law or just the process of being a lawyer, and apply them in many other instances. That was before law school got so darn expensive. So it's a little bit more of a cost benefit analysis now, but I see the two disciplines of just pure English degree or a graduate degree in English. And basically a graduate degree in law. That's what we have. We have doctors of jurisprudence. I see them just so closely related, and the skill set's very much the same. As Jasmine's talking about, when you get into writing, a complicated distribution agreement, or if I'm deposing the chief financial officer of a public company, I have to have a little better understanding of logistics or of how to read a balance sheet, which we're not going to get in an English degree, but we're not getting that in law school either. That has to all be picked up after the fact. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, or Jasmine, if you have another perspective.
I would just say one alternate career path, I think, for people who may be interested in law school or who may go to law school and completely hate legal practice is doing some type of policy work or working on the Hill. That's something that I see a lot, mainly in DC, of course, but that's something to consider before investing in law school because, like Scott said, it is quite pricey now. So make sure that that you actually want to practice, or at least that you're willing to practice for a few years before you spend the money. And that's why roundtables like this is good so that you can hear our experience, poke our brains, and kind of see if legal practice is something that you could actually do long term.
Yeah, and I would sort of throw the question back at you, Aaron, because I think that while both of our experiences is that the as English majors we were well prepared for law school, I think it prepares you for everything. And you know, we've talked before, you know where I'm coming from. I mean, I think my English degree is as important to me and as valuable to me as my law degree. And I certainly don't think I would be the lawyer that I am today, whatever I am, without my English degree.
Mhm.
We love to hear that.
Well,
And
it's true, and amazingly, it's how I feel.
we have our first question coming in from our Q&A, which, by the way, if anybody does have questions, you can pop them in that little Q&A section at the bottom. And that is asking the importance of textual interpretation in your job, which is something obviously both shared within literature and law.
Oh, if I could only share my screen. I 30 minutes before we went online, I was exchanging emails with a con law professor in Washington, D.C. about the textualist approach to Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. So whoever asked that question, you are after my heart. Jasmine?
I mean, Scott is right. It's like the very essence of practicing, especially as a constitutional lawyer.
Mhm. I mean, words are how we communicate. Words have meaning. And
Mhm.
I don't know if anybody on the call knows the word deconstructionist. I'm sure you know, Aaron and Gerard probably do, but you know, you got to start from the assumption in the legal context that the person who wrote the words had a particular meaning in mind. And the question is how you go about discerning that meaning.
Yeah, and then consistency within a single text is very important. You know, if you're drafting an agreement and you say material breach in multiple places and then just breach in another place, well, why is that? And what does that mean? And what are the implications for that when you sue? So it's very, very important.
And if you say no person shall be a senator or representative or hold any other office, civil or military, under the United States, you know, because they started with senator and representative, which obviously are two rungs below president and vice president, did they intend to omit those, or do you have to go and determine whether or not those positions are offices under the United States? Tune in to the Supreme Court argument next Tuesday, and you'll get to hear a lot of talk about that. So text does make a difference. And when I was teaching legal writing at SMU, I used to open it with this statement, and some of you may recognize it because it was written by a writer. Be good and you will be lonesome. Anybody attribute that quote? Oh,
No.
nobody knows that quote? It's Mark Twain.
I mean, that's usually the good guess.
Right. So I would ask the first semester law students at SMU Law School, what does that mean? Where are the variables in that sentence? Be good and you will be lonesome. And we would get in a pretty good dialogue about that. So, you know, words have meanings, but lots of words have multiple meanings in different contexts. So it's very important. Whoever asked that question, way to go.
So thinking about kind of turning to our majors as they're starting to think about their career path, Do you think that there are some types of law that are more approachable to English majors than others?
My initial reaction is no, just because the skills are universal. You know, a litigator is gonna use the same skills that I do, but just for a different document. So that's my answer. Scott, what about you?
I agree, and just as there are multiple personality types that become English majors, there are different skill sets, whether maybe someone just loves to read and analyze and therefore doesn't want to go to court. Maybe someone loves to read Jane Austen and wants to stand up and be one of her characters, So I don't think that it necessarily, the English major itself would direct you in any particular type of practice.
Wonderful. Yeah. And within kind of again thinking as people are moving forward in the process of thinking about applying to law school and thinking about like what that job looks like, in terms of writing skills, what can students prepare for now during their coursework? What types of classes did you find to be useful, or did you find to be things that you think you continue to think back on now?
I would say any type of rhetoric and writing class or any type of persuasive writing class is very helpful. Can't recall if there's a legal writing class or like an introduction to legal writing class at UT, but if that's available, that would be helpful too.
We do indeed have a new legal writing class that we just opened up, I believe, this past year.
Awesome.
Yeah, and maybe I've forgotten it, but I wasn't paying attention. The emphasis that the department has on rhetoric now, I think would absolutely be beneficial to someone who's seriously thinking about law school. Because I don't specifically remember taking or even having the ability to take a course of that nature. That was a long time ago.
Well, and I think those are excellent suggestions, and obviously the department has quite a few of those different courses. And then also interested in thinking, what can students do now to help them prepare to apply to law school?
Practice
Thanks.
LSAT. What
That's
did
a tough one because I'm not as familiar with the process. I think it's changed since I applied a few years ago. Scott, I'm not sure if you've heard this, but I don't think that logic games are a part of the LSAT anymore.
I have not paid much attention to it, I have to say.
Okay.
I can
Well,
tell you
I
what I
think
did. I worked as a night clerk the summer between my junior year in college and senior year in college, and so I took practice LSAT exams every night for like 2 months during sitting at the desk at Reese Hall. That's how I prepared.
yeah.
That's how I prepared for the LSAT.
Yeah, that's how I prepare for the LSAT, and that's how I prepare for the bar. You have to put yourself under test conditions before the actual test to see how you'll perform. So I would suggest that. I would also just I would also suggest just really leaning into the English department, establishing relationships with professors because they may be the ones to write you letters of recommendation.
Well, and I think there are folks at the law school in Knoxville that would be more than happy to talk. I know Dr. Anderson has been working to try to make a connection with Professor Cornett. Isn't that, about that, Aaron? Is that the legal writing course you're referring to?
That is not specifically tied to that, but yes, I know what you're
Yeah.
speaking of.
But while most of the people have turned over, I know there are still good people over there that if anybody wanted to wander across Cumberland and sit down and talk to someone about how to prepare for the LSAT, I'm sure they'd be happy to do it.
Wonderful. Do we have any additional questions? I want to give space for folks who have but I'm making significant eye contact in the Zoom room here. So does anyone have any questions?
Well, I guess I have one question. Would you say that like or what's the percentage of like from writing to speaking that you see on a day-to-day basis?
I would say,
So for me,
yeah,
oh, go ahead, Scott.
I'll go first on that one. I would say speaking first, because to the extent that we're all back in office and we are trying desperately to get everybody back in office, your interaction just up and down the hallway with your fellow attorneys, whether they're young associates or old partners like me, I mean, that makes an impression. So certainly speaking ability is important. And then when you actually get into your legal skills, writing is becomes more prevalent. But being able to communicate with your fellow lawyers is important.
I agree with that. And I would say in terms of actual substantive work for me as a transactional attorney, the overwhelming majority of what I do is, reading and writing, not so much speaking. But like clients, like Scott said, if I'm speaking to a partner or a fellow associate or to a client, on a Teams call, on a Zoom call, then, you need to have those skills.
But they're obviously both important. I would assume we just did an interview yesterday, and we spoke with a first year law student here in the office. She was extremely impressive. But after we were done, somebody said, "But have you seen her writing sample?" And I had to admit that I had not. And so we clearly look at both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Well, we are closing in on time. I do want to say, do we have, Jasmine, Scott, do you have any kind of last minute advice you would like to give? Any stories you didn't get a chance to share that you would like to? Any fond memories of UT?
Oh, you don't have nearly enough time for that. Go ahead, Jasmine. You go first.
I feel the same way. I would say first, know your why. If you're considering law school, know why it is that you're interested in it. Because as we talked about earlier, it's very expensive and it's life changing. It's a big investment financially, but also it can be emotionally taxing. It's notoriously a stressful career. So before you go into it, just know what your why is and do your diligence. Speak with attorneys like us, speak with attorneys in your community, like Scott said, go across Cumberland, see who you can speak with, and speak with law students too, because they're most similarly situated to you. So that is what I would suggest in terms of advice. In terms of fond memories, just please enjoy being able to set your schedule. That's definitely something I miss as a student, just the certainty of knowing what my day would look like and the autonomy in deciding what my day would look like. Because as an attorney, I can think that I'm going to close my laptop for the day, and then I get a random email from a client or a partner, and, my day
Yep.
kind of goes awry. So just enjoy the freedom and the flexibility that you have now.
Your time is not your own, Jasmine.
That's right.
No, so I would just say, and I think I told you this, Aaron. I wasn't an English major because I wanted to be a lawyer. I became a lawyer after I got everything I could possibly get out of an English degree. So my advice is just enjoy it, and maybe you'll choose to go to graduate school as an English student or any other discipline. But what you're doing now is going to translate into whatever field you go into. I believe that 100%, not just because Aaron and Misty agreed to put me on a Zoom with students. I'll stop people on the sidewalk and say, "Hey, you should be an English major." I'm done.
Well, thank you both so much again for being a part of this. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, your stories, your advice. We really appreciate you, and you're continuing to rah rah the department. We need all the cheerleaders who want to come to the table. So, thank you again for your time and your support of our students, and we look forward to speaking with you hopefully again in the future.
Great talking with
Of
you. I'm in the
course.
book if anybody wants to call. Feel free.
Wonderful.
That's right. And Aaron, feel free to share my contact information. Happy to be a resource.
We appreciate you deeply. So thank you both so much.
All right. Have a good evening.